All right. Hi, everybody. I hope everybody can hear me. This is Jane. I am in South Texas right now and not in Baton Rouge. Unfortunately, since our meeting got pushed, I already had this trip planned, and Daniel and I are birding in the Rio Grande Valley. So we are co-hosting this meeting with Catherine in the room and me down here. Catherine, one of the things you're going to need to remember is when you're speaking to speak toward your computer so that it records properly. I know that's going to be, I mean, you can see it on your screen, so that should work okay. So
what I did is I turned the podium so
podium
that I can face them and look to the side for that, because I'm too short to look over my computer. So I have to stand to the side so that I can see my audience. Otherwise, I'm too short.
You're right. So, and Catherine will tell the story of this trip as we go through. But as we said in the email, this was a trip that Catherine and Colette and Cathy and I took in July of last year, down to originally just to Ecuador, but then, oh, by the way, let's go to the Galapagos while we're at it. And we added an 8-day tour of the Galapagos on the front end of our Ecuador trip. So someday you may hear about our Ecuador trip too, but tonight we're going to start with the Galapagos. So take it away, Kat.
Okay, so we'll see if the active speaker view doesn't show me. So I'm going to have to figure out how to do that. There we go. All right, so now I got everybody instead of just me. Okay, so like she said, we decided that we wanted to go to Ecuador and the Galapagos Islands back in July. And Jane had originally scheduled the tour through Ecuador Bird Tours. And then we found out that, well, I found out, I did not know, one of us, I might have been Colette, I'm not sure, but had mentioned the Galapagos. And I had no idea we were so close. I was very excited because ever since I was a child, I wanted to go to the Galapagos. I wasn't allowed to watch much TV when I was younger, but my dad did let us watch the Jacques Cousteau specials when they came on. And one of those specials was on the marine iguana in the Galapagos Islands. And I said, one day, I'm going. Now, it might have taken me 50 plus years, who's counting, to finally go, but I wasn't going to miss a chance. And the only one available was the 8-day tour that we tagged on at the beginning. So Ecuador Bird Tours got us on a boat through Tierra Verde Tours. And we were going to ride on this beautiful Fragata yacht. That was just gorgeous. And there's different classes of yachts that are in the Galapagos, the lowest being the economy, which is what we ended up on, and not this gorgeous yacht. Because what happened was that a few weeks before we were supposed to leave, the indigenous people in Ecuador decided to revolt and riot against President Lasso. He called it an attempted coup because of rising gas and food prices. And they weren't able to afford simple things. And they asked that he please, take them into account and lower the gas and the gas and food prices. So it ended up being, they blocked roads, there were riots, people died, hundreds were injured. The airport was closed. A lot of this was happening to Quito, where we were supposed to fly in. So it wasn't until, we were watching the news daily, trying to figure out, and then they were reasoning, saying, okay, well, yeah, but this is happening in Ecuador. If we can get a flight into Quito and then fly to the Galapagos, at least the first part of our trip, we won't be near it, so we'll be safe, It doesn't really work that way, I don't think, but, we had planned it, and I was just, Colette was being the reasonable one and was saying, there is a warning out there that, we probably shouldn't go there right now. She was the voice of reason, but it ended up that they did come to an agreement at the end of June that the government was going to give some to the indigenous people, and they're going to wait to see that he did give it to them. So at the last minute, we were able to go, but our beautiful Fragata yacht had something that needed to be repaired on it. And so, since the roads were blocked during the riots and people couldn't get through, the part that the Fragata needed was not there. So they said, not to worry. We have a sister yacht called the Golondrina. It goes everywhere the Fragata yacht goes. It's not as nice as the Fragata, but it goes everywhere, the same itinerary. We'll give you a split the difference, etc. So we're like, okay. Well,
And this is 2 days before we leave now,
Yes.
not like we have a lot of notice and ability to change our itinerary.
Yeah. So it also gave us extra money we weren't expecting, but there's a reason why we got extra money. But anyhow, so this is it, right? You look at it, you say, well, that's not bad, right? That looks pretty nice, right? It's not as nice as the other one, but it doesn't look too bad. It's not double decker or anything like that, like the other one. I mean, this is what we were supposed to be in. This is our roomy beds and places to walk and all this other stuff. And this is the reality of what we were in. So literally there was no, now I'm short. I can't even see over the computer up here, as you can see. There's no ladder to that top bunk. So I am monkey crawling at night, trying to get up on the top bunk. And okay, I'm 60, so I have to pee in the middle of the night, okay? So getting down from that bunk, I would have to grab one end of the mattress and slowly drop myself off, feel with my foot, trying to find the lower rail without Jane being crushed between my foot and the rail to get up in the middle of the night. So it was a little bit of a challenge. That door is latched to the bed. When you open the door, you latch it to the bed.
The only way two people can be in that room at the same time is to be fully on the bunk.
Yes. They couldn't fit the luggage in the room with us. Oh, the bathroom is behind the door. So the bathroom is behind that door. And we actually, the luggage and things wouldn't fit in the cabin. So the captain had to store our luggage somewhere else because there wasn't room for our luggage in the cabin. So that was our accommodations, but we didn't let it dampen our spirits. We were very, very excited to be there. So the Galapagos Islands is about 600 miles off the coast of Ecuador. Up until this trip, to be quite honest, I did not know the Galapagos Islands were part of Ecuador, but it's considered part of Ecuador. I didn't know it was 600 miles that far off from Ecuador. We ended up going to about 9 of the islands. There's 4 inhabited and 13 main islands. Where we flew into, Baltra is not considered an inhabited island because it has an airport there, it has a military base, all that, but apparently people don't live there, they work there. So that's not considered one of the inhabited islands. But Jane, did you want to add anything?
No, that's good.
Okay. So we were kind of surprised about the distance between the Galapagos Islands. Like we had to travel from Santa Cruz to Genovesa was 10 hours. So we would travel these long distances during the night when we were sleeping. So we'd go to bed and we'd wake up on a different island. But as you can see, some of these islands were 7 hours, 8 hours away between the islands, which we had no idea. But this is our distances that we traveled between the islands.
We went to 11 islands?
Then I guess we did. 1, 2, I guess that's our itinerary. So that's from the captain. Some of them were really small, like Bartolome was just like the spot, like off to the side. So some of them were small islands that we went to, but yeah. So this is and then during the night, the seas sometimes could get very, very, Colette is over there laughing. Yeah, it's not like that. Okay, so what really happened is that you go to bed and you wedge your arm between the mattress and the side of the boat and hope you get flung off during the night because the waves are rocking back and forth and you just are holding on for dear life. So that is why she's laughing over there, because
Yeah, you weren't being rocked and lulled to sleep. You were wondering when you were going to fall off the bed onto the floor.
And Colette and I were by ourselves one day, and we're in the dining area, and I'm trying to fix tea, and my thing of sugar just goes flying off the table, and sugar goes all over the dining area. And I try to get up to get it, and I'm flung from one side of the boat to the other. And Colette's like, stop, let me get it. So she gets up, and I'm crawling to the kitchen. I was able to find a dustpan, a broom. She said she was going to sweep it up. So she's sweeping it up. I'm trying to stay on the floor without falling over. And we were able to, Colette was able to clean up the sugar. I was able to crawl to the, yeah, no tea. Yeah. So it was fun.
Yeah.
It was quite the adventure, really. Okay. So on day one, we took the flight from Guayaquil to the Galapagos, and it's about 2.5 hour flight. And about 30 minutes before we arrived to the airport, the flight attendants walked down the aisle and sprayed insecticide in every overhead compartment and closed it back. And the reason they did that is that they're very, very, very serious about invasive species in the Galapagos. So when you get to the airport, all of a sudden these dogs are sniffing the luggage, and you're like, oh my gosh, people bring drugs into the Galapagos. And I was told, no, those dogs are to sniff out invasive species. They sniff out passion fruit, dragon fruit, oranges. That's what the dogs are trained for. What I do like is if you look very closely at this picture, our police officer, along with his holstered gun, has a doggy poop bone hanging from his keychain. So I think that is just little poopy bags there. So I thought that was kind of cute. But anyhow, so they're very, very serious about invasive species. Also, in the right, actually, Kathy's here. She got this picture for me. But the Galapagos is the first ecological airport. Has a first ecological airport, meaning that they are run entirely by solar and wind power. And the building that they have is built from 80% from recycled materials. And they're very conscientious to keep the islands in as pristine. I don't think, especially like on the ones that were uninhabited, I don't remember seeing any litter on the uninhabited islands at all, to be quite honest. But we'll talk about litter on Santa Cruz in a minute when we talk about this gentleman that we met there. So right off the bat, we're introduced to endemics right from the airport. Okay, now these weren't from the airport, but Jane, you want to talk about Darwin's theory and how it came about with the finches?
Well, I think most people have heard about Darwin's finches and the variations between the different finches and the adaptations. And Darwin is very famous for, arriving at his theory of evolution based on the finches. But it was actually the mockingbirds that clued him into the fact that species were making these evolutionary changes as they moved from different islands. So that the different islands have different ecosystems. And these mockingbirds was very apparent just from the way they looked, the way they acted, that they were changing their behavior and then their morphology based on the food availability on the different islands. And that actually led to the finches and the whole theory of evolution. So we got to see 4 total mockingbirds. We didn't get a picture of the other one, but on the different islands. We got many pictures of finches, but I tell you, they are a heck of a lot harder to tell apart than the mockingbirds were. So I'm sure Catherine has some of the finches in the president though.
There you go, Darwin's finches. So there was 13
right at the airport. Yeah.
Yeah, right at like not only at the airport, but in the airport. You know how we get house sparrows in the airport? They have Darwin finches in the airport. Like you're waiting at a gate and one's hopping in front of you, so it was pretty exciting that we were seeing these endemics right there at the airport. One of my favorite Darwin finches, and I was studying them a bit before we went to see that I could tell them all apart when I got there, which I could not. tell any of them apart when I got there. But anyhow, one of them is actually a vampire finch, and it drinks the blood of the Nazca booby. So that was kind of a cool finch to learn about. Look it up. All right, so on day one, like I said, we're here at the airport and we see our first endemics, and this is a Galapagos dove. And it's just kind of looking around over there. And I have the Santa Cruz lava lizard. The lava lizards I was obsessed with. There's 7 different species of lava lizards in the Galapagos Islands. So I was taking pictures of all of them. And this young lady from England, Gina, was like, "Are you writing a dissertation on lava lizards?" And I was like, "No." And she goes, "You sure take a lot of pictures of them." So, but it was pretty funny. So, and then also here we are at the airport. We have these 3.5 foot iguanas just kind of like walking around. And this was over by one of the gates at the airport. And then we had this one here on the left that was posing really nice for everybody to get pictures of. So that's just coloration. That's like a cow, like a, like a iguana cow, loose flap skin. Okay. So what is the noise that we hear? The wind. That's the wind. What? So, but the thing is, I have to turn up the sound so you can hear Jane. So unfortunately, the video is kind of loud. The water was always choppy? Not always. Yeah, but just only when we wanted to sleep or take a nap. But other than that, if we weren't sleeping or taking a nap, it was nice. But if we wanted to sleep or take a nap, that was its cue to kick up. So
and just to mention, I don't know if you mentioned this somewhere else, but we had jackets on almost every day. I mean, these are desert islands out in the middle of the Pacific Ocean, but with the wind and fairly cool weather, we had jackets on. It would warm up in the afternoon, but it was surprisingly cool.
Yeah. And there's another endemic, the lava heron. And this is when we were at the water taxi to catch the cab to our boat. And this is us heading out to the boat. And we saw boobies, the blue-footed boobies, and I got really excited. So anyhow, but he's pointing out to our ship, and we're asking, "Oh, which ship is it?" Because we see all these big ships. And if you look at this little speck, like this ship that's on the far left, and the camera goes, you'll see this little speck next to it, and that's our ship. Back between it. So anyhow, it was a very, very small ship, and I have a slide later on that will actually illustrate that. But the captain of the boat greeted us when we got on board. He was there to greet us, and the crew was really took care of us while we were there. Now there were 12 passengers on this boat from representing 7 countries. So we thought that was a really amazing mix of nationalities, and really you couldn't have picked a better group of people. I mean, everybody meshed well together. Everyone got along. There was no trouble or somebody's personality not getting. It seemed like everyone was just really, you couldn't ask for better people to be on it. We all had a similar interest. And so there was 4 of us from the United States. And then we had Salima, and she was from Switzerland. And then we have Zita from Sweden, and Gina from England, and Jason from Singapore. And we had Lasse from Sweden, and Koen from the Netherlands, and Pernille, who is from Denmark, and her husband, Martin, and that was our group. How do you like my gold arena bunch? They were freaked out about their faces doing that animation, but anyhow, I thought it was pretty cool. But Roberto was our naturalist guide, and to be a guide in the Galapagos, you have to go through school. So it's not just some, Marvin from, high school summer vacation. This is actually a career for these naturalist guides. And the islands are very, very well regulated there, so that, and you could ask Jane and Cathy and Colette, but some of the islands that I stepped foot on, I thought we were the first people who had ever visited these islands. They were so pristine. There were no footprints in the sand. It was like gorgeous, but it's very well regulated. The guides have times that they're allowed to be on these islands. So like our group could be on the island from 2 to 4, and then we were supposed to leave, and another tour group would come from like 4 to 6. And sometimes we might run a little late, so they'd be coming on while we were leaving. And there was some drama on one island I'll talk about a little later, but we weren't able to see how it unfolded because we had to get off the island because it was our time. But you had to follow specific paths. You weren't allowed to go off the path. So it was really very well regulated, so that it did feel like the uninhabited islands. Some of them felt like we were the first ones that had ever stepped foot on them. But before we did finished our evening, Roberto got up and kind of gave our itinerary for the next day. And every night after dinner, he would present to us a slide presentation. This is where we're going the next day. This is what we're going to do. This is what you're going to see, etc., which was really nice. But he also, in the morning, he would write on a whiteboard exactly what itinerary, what we needed to bring, exactly what we might see. So it was really, really nice to have all that laid out for us every day. We would typically go on hikes in the morning and go snorkeling in the afternoon. At the end of the presentation, I did include some videos, underwater videos, so that you could see some of the life that we saw underwater.
Everything was in English?
Yes, yes. Now he was bilingual. He spoke both English and Spanish, but everyone on the boat spoke English. So it was just fine.
Right. And he was native, and it was very apparent when we went snorkeling. He was a free diver, and he could go down 30 or 40 feet underwater without snorkeling gear.
And stay down there.
Phenomenal photos, and it was
I
quite
brought
impressive.
I brought my GoPro, and he saw me with my GoPro, and he would grab it from me, and then he'd dive down deep, and I say, okay, fine, you go. Because mine would be like bobbing and dodging from the surface, but he would actually go down and be with the marine life. So we got some really good videos, and I'm pretty excited about that. So we had 2 kinds of landings. The ship itself boat. The boat itself never went up to the islands. We would always get in a panga, which was like an inflated raft with a motor on it. And it would bring us either directly up to the island, which would be a dry landing where we would step foot on dry land, or it would bring us a few feet from shore, and we'd hop in the water and we'd go up to the shore. And as you can see, look, does it look like there's a lot of traffic on that island?
Yeah.
The only thing you see is our footprints, right? And there's the sea lions that are hanging out there. Yeah, it was pretty incredible. And it is true. And you'll see later in some other photos, the animals just were indifferent to us. So we had to keep 6 feet away from them, but you'll learn later on that wasn't always possible to do. So the meals on the ship, Ecuadorian meals, I found were a lot of fruit and stews, and they did a very good job at it. And they had fresh fruit juices. They had nice meals. Did you see anything, Jane or Cathy or Colette, you wanted to add about their meals?
It was amazing that the chef planned out an 8-day cruise for us in that small boat with fresh food every single day. That was
And there was a
phenomenal.
little issue where
Very impressive.
we had to go to shore because they were afraid that some of the food might spoil because of an incident we had, but we'll talk about that a little bit later. So day one, we go from Baltra, where the island, where the airport is, and we go to Santa Cruz, to the back of it where Bacchus Beach is, and it's the barge beach because I guess during World War II, they left behind, the United States military left behind some barges. And the metal is actually protruding up out of the sand on the beach, which amazes me that no one's stepped on this jagged, rusty metal that's sticking up from the sand, but it really is that way. But
Yeah.
like I said, wanted to see a marine iguana all my life. Here we are sitting watching some American flamingos foraging in the water. Coon is sitting there, and all of a sudden a marine iguana just struts up next to him and plops itself down. And I'm like, oh my gosh, that's the only thing I wanted to see. I can't believe I saw it. I'm so lucky to see it. I took a lot of pictures of that marine iguana. And guess what? There were hundreds more marine iguanas. So it was just an indicator of what exactly we were going to see and how close they would just come right next to you and not be concerned about us. So on day 2, we went to Genovesa. Remember, that's a 10-hour drive over the ocean, 10-hour sail. Thank you. Sail is the word I'm looking for. And while we were there, we saw some endemic gulls. We saw a lava gull. And we also have this unique gull called a swallow-tailed gull. And it is a nocturnal feeder. It is the only gull that feeds at night. It is active sometimes during the day. They don't know when it sleeps. But this particular gull is a nocturnal feeder, the only one in the world. And these are both endemic. We went to Prince Philip Steps on the island, which is a very steep, rocky set of stairs. And quite frankly, someone with knee issues, as I have, I was like, gosh, some of these things that we did, I was like, how am I going to get through it? Because it's very, very challenging. These are volcanic islands. These are, you're walking on lava, uneven lava rocks, and it sometimes can be challenging. But we made it. And then we had some storm petrels that, of course, they're endemic, these particular ones, to the Galapagos. We have the white vented and we have the white rumped. I'm going to see if I can move
Wedge
this.
rumped.
There we go. I mean, wedge rump, sorry. The white vented and the wedge rumped, and you can see the wedge, obviously, on the wedge rump, the little triangle. So that's aptly named. But to give you an idea of how many there were on that particular island, these are all storm petrels just flying around. So you see all these storm petrels and you wonder, well, does it have a predator? Is there anything out there that might like to eat the storm petrels? Well, it just so happens that on this island, there were short-eared owls. And they were flying in amongst the storm petrels and they were eating them. And I'm right next to him. I'm filming him eating one. He doesn't seem to care. And yeah, so these guys were just eating the bounty that was available to them. But look at that face. I mean, he's just like, so you want to watch me? Okay, watch this. But anyhow.
In Louisiana and probably in most of the US, the short-eared owl is extremely nocturnal. It's really hard to see a short-eared owl in Louisiana during the day. But this is during the day when it's just hunting and feeding on storm petrels.
I had literally a few months before that done a field trip to find one of these in Louisiana. And we saw them, and I have a very blurry picture that I say, yeah, that is an owl. That blob at night, hazy blob, that is a short-eared owl. I'm so happy I got that picture. There you go. So they're on Rutherford Beach Road in Cameron. So Christine
right now, yeah. At night, yeah.
At night, yes. So anyhow, it just so happened that I came across these, so I was pretty happy that I finally got a good, I think it's a pretty clear video of them compared to a blurb, so. Yes.
So I see the owl like there in part.
Yeah.
Obviously, probably eating his bill. I'm kind of curious, like what buzzard or other critter types would like eat up the rest of like the birds or whatever else is going on.
Was there any other predators besides the Galapagos hawk, maybe?
Possibly, but I can't remember if it was on that island.
Yeah, the
I don't think-
Galapagos, I don't know if
know
it's
that-
on that island. The lizards, they ate vegetation. The
Yeah,
iguanas and stuff. They didn't eat, so I don't know. That's a good question.
Vultures or buzzards?
I didn't see.
no,
Nope.
no vultures, no,
Nope.
no other raptors other than the Galapagos hawk that I
Yeah.
can remember in the whole trip.
Yeah. Yeah. So I don't know, but the Nazca boobies, this was a courtship. And basically what they do is the male kind of hands her a stick to try to impress her. So she's kind of like turning away from him and he's like, oh, I'm going to impress her with my big stick. So he reaches down and grabs a stick. And she's like, nah, I don't want it. So he decides he's going to put a ring on it. So he finds a smaller stick and then he's going to put it on her foot. So there you go. So now they're engaged. Okay, so some of the mammals they had there, maybe, but no, there was other. So some of the mammals in the Galapagos was the Galapagos fur seal and the Galapagos sea lion. The fur seal is smaller than other fur seals, and it has to adapt to the warmer weather because it's thick fur, and so that's why it has a smaller body mass. And then you have the sea lions, which we saw plenty of. Besides seeing the Nazca boobies and the blue-footed boobies, there were also red-footed boobies there. And on the right, you see our great frigate bird chick in the blue inside of its mouth. So, look at the gnaws on that groundfinch. I mean, that is a big, big nostril. Beak, bill, but you know what I'm saying. Anyhow, Jimmy Durante would be jealous. But the Nazca boobies, Jane is like got her iPhone camera and she's just got it right above the birds. They're in the middle of the trail. Now
They're
we're
in the
supposed to-
path, yeah.
Right. We're supposed to keep 6 feet away from them, but a lot of times you can't because they are on the only path you're allowed to take. So it's kind of like, excuse me, pardon me, excuse me, and you just kind of try to go around them. There's that little bitty boat, like right there. That's us. So yeah, so that little boat, the second from the right is our boat. So we were a little bit, out, what would be the word for that? We didn't have big boats.
Outclassed, for sure.
Outclassed. Maybe we were actually the lowest class of boat that you can get there.
Right.
But that didn't matter. I really think it made it better for all of us because we were a small group and we really got to bond. Everyone got to bond because we're in such a small enclosed space. So I think actually it might have benefited us to be on such a small boat because it had more camaraderie between everybody. So this is another endemic, the Galapagos penguin. It's the only penguin north of the equator. And the way it adapts to being north of the equator is that the Humboldt current is a cold current, and that's why it's able to live there because of the cool water that comes through the Humboldt current. However, on El Nino events, it has been very tragic for the Galapagos penguin. There's been a lot of deaths, die-offs whenever there's a warm water event there.
How big are they? Are they small or big?
About that big. Would you say about that big?
Yeah.
Maybe a foot and a half, maybe?
Not a foot and a half, maybe 13 or 14 inches.
Okay,
They're
foot.
little.
Yeah, they are itty bitty. And so then we went to, this was up to the top of, what island were we on here?
I don't remember.
Okay, anyhow, so we took 360 plus steps to the top of this island for a 360-degree view of the other islands and Pinnacle Rock. Pinnacle Rock, some things that I read said that it was a volcano cone that was naturally formed. But then other things I read said that during World War II, the United States used that island for a missile site and that it was formed from bombing that island. So I'm not sure what it is, but it was kind of like a moon-like appearance on this particular island. And there's our guide, Roberto, looking for snakes for us. We were looking for Galapagos snakes. And Jane got this picture, but this is like an endemic plant. It can only be found on this particular island. It grows in very sparse circumstances, but as you can see, doesn't it look like almost like a lunar surface? So,
Yeah.
and they had ancient lava flow on the islands. And Jane, do you want to talk? Because you questioned about the Sally Lightfoot crab and its color. Did you want to talk about that?
No, go ahead.
Okay. So basically you have these black volcanic islands where it's just dark lava. And then you have this bright orange crab that can be seen from very far off. So what kind of survival strategy does this crab have when it's just like doing a flashing sign, here I am? So, but it was there, they were everywhere. It seemed like they were on.
And most of the animals there that we saw are fairly muted in coloration, except for this crab that was so bright and neon orange. So it is just a strange ecological fact that they're so curiously bright.
Yeah. And there's at the top, and that's Pinnacle Rock that's over on the right that kind of looks like a shark's tooth pointed out. But you actually had like a 360-degree view of the other islands that were around. It was really quite beautiful. And this is, there were sharks around our boat. One day we're looking off the edge of the boat and there's these nice large sharks that are like circling around the boat. So we were pretty excited to see them. And then when we got back, we ended up having to go back to Santa Cruz because what happened is that was it a generator or the motor that went out?
So the backup generator. So all the boats have two generators, the regular one and the backup. So we were running on one generator, which meant that we had no backup. So if we got out in, off in our tour somewhere, our cruise, and that single generator failed, we'd be dead in the water. So it was very important to get the two generators running again so that we would have that backup. And unfortunately, that meant that we had to dock for some period of time for that work to be done.
And we had, what was I gonna say? So, all right, yeah. So so the night before, when the first generator went out, it had controlled the lights. And so when I got up in the middle of the night to go to the restroom, it was in pitch black. So I'm feeling for where it's a very small bathroom. Like the toilet is maybe less than a foot away from the shower. And there's like a lip that is up on the shower. So I'm finding where the toilet is, and the back of my heels hit up against the shower. And I remember the waves are going like this, and I'm trying to hold on to things, and I fly back into the shower and I slumped down onto the floor of the shower. And I was like, man, I'm going to be hurt the second day of the trip, So I really did see stars, and I was kind of concerned, but I was able to get up and continue on. But also the second day when we were out there, I was excited about hammerhead sharks, and Roberto had hopped in the water and he said, hammerhead shark. So we all jumped in the water, swam towards him to see the hammerhead shark. And then all of a sudden I'm like, what my lips are burning, my face is burning. And I brought my shorty wetsuit. I didn't get the full wetsuits that they had on board. And I started feeling things on my arm. And all of a sudden I didn't want to see the hammerhead shark anymore. I just wanted to swim back to the boat. And as I get onto the boat, I slip between the motor and the seat, and I still had the bruise on my leg, which the doctor told me the other day that was going to be permanent. That's like a tattoo now. But anyhow, so then I was stung all over with jellyfish. Like, so other people who had gotten worse than me. Okay, mine, I took Benadryl, I was fine. But it was kind of cool because I did have this like little mark across here that the guys thought I was like Scarface and thought it was really cool. But anyhow,
there were 3 or 4 people in the party that snorkeled without wetsuits, just in bathing suits, and they got stung over most of their bodies. At least those of us in wetsuits were limited to the amount of sting that we got, but there were a couple, and that was the first snorkel.
yes. And Jane gets on the boat, and Roberto is like picking off jellyfish.
Yeah,
off
they
of
were
her.
beautiful. They were bright neon, electric blue. They were gorgeous, but yeah, a little painful. 4 or 5 foot long tentacles, and yeah, that was not fun.
Nurse.
I'll let you get in the water without a
Well, it's optional. I mean, you're an adult. I mean, if you don't want to wear a wetsuit,
wetsuit. He couldn't tell you that there's a whole mess of jellyfish.
we didn't know. We didn't know.
Yeah, and Roberto didn't know either, to be honest. I mean, he
Yeah,
would not
yeah.
have put us in the water there if he knew,
Yeah,
obviously.
Yeah.
And that was the only incident that we had with jellyfish.
That was the
So,
only issue we had with jellyfish.
Yeah.
So it just happened to be the very first one. And I thought, what am I getting myself into? So anyhow.
well, and y'all all need to just be glad that Catherine's not going to show you photographs of all of her bruises, because
Jane called me a walking cautionary tale on this trip, because if there was a way for me to hurt myself, I was going to find it. And we could spend one whole presentation on talking about that. So anyhow, but yes. Alrighty. So we had to go back to Santa Cruz, long story short. And the blue-footed boobies were diving and hunting right in front of where we would park our panga. So I put it on slow motion so that you could actually see them diving. But look in the background. Those are all blue-footed boobies diving. Yep, that's slow motion. Yeah, it was pretty incredible. Yeah, I mean, there were so many of them. It was incredible. We did take a trip to the lava tunnels. Like we said, this was a volcanic island, all of them. And so we were able to go underground and actually go through a lava tunnel. That was Pernell on the right there. I'm pretty proud of that picture. But anyhow, that was, we had to go down, and it was pretty lush it was pretty lush vegetation on top of this lava tunnel, which I was
on this particular island, yes.
Yes, not the other one. But
Right.
yeah, so we would go down into this hole. Basically, there were steep steps that went down to the hole. Then you had to kind of crawl through a little entrance that was maybe 4 feet. And then once we got there, the room opened up and you had these lava tunnels. So and there we are. This kind of gives you an idea how steep it is.
The lava tunnels went from the inland all the way out to the ocean.
And this is Martine coming up in the end. I tell you what, the young men who were on this trip, they kind of looked after me, but they didn't want me to know that they were looking after me. So they were just kind of like, if they'd see me struggling behind, they'd like come back, oh, hey, Catherine, how you doing? And I knew that they were just back there to kind of like make sure I was okay, and they would help me cross rocks and things. So they were trying to give me my dignity, but help me at the same time. So I was very appreciative for them being on there. So how many of y'all have been driving down the highway and a giant tortoise just as, casually walking towards you? So we went to the highlands in Santa Cruz to see a reserve, El Chato Reserve, which had the giant tortoises. And there is a giant tortoise poop on the right-hand side. And And this is not a slow motion video. This is truly, that's how fast they move. And before I got there, I read that you will never see a giant tortoise in water. And on this reserve, they had a big watering hole, and all the there you just saw shells everywhere in there. They loved going into this watering hole. As a matter of fact, we actually have a video of a race between two tortoises that are heading towards this hole. So
Again, not slow motion.
this is not slow motion. This is them racing each other to see who will get to the watering hole first. Okay, so on day 4, we spent it on Santa Cruz because of we were supposed to have the generator repaired by 2 o'clock that afternoon. Now, the previous evening when we came in, the owner of the cruise or the boat came to a restaurant and bought us all dinner. He apologized about having to come into town and dock and for the inconvenience, and that he was going to all pay for everybody's dinner. So that was nice of him. But we also, there's so many things that we did and so many animals that we saw that I could talk to you till midnight tonight. But so it was really hard to just kind of put a few things into the presentation that you might like. So this is a difference between some of the giant tortoises. You had a dome shell, and then you had a saddleback shell. The saddleback shell, they just kind of looked like they were dead. They were just kind of like laying around on the ground. But yeah, that's the difference between the two shells. There's 2 different species.
But
Yes.
talk about why the saddleback is shaped like that.
Why is the saddleback shaped like that?
You talk about it. Well, one of us has to talk about it.
I forgot.
The saddleback tortoises live on the islands where the vegetation is taller, and so that
That's
tortoise
right.
always had to reach up to get to the food, and so over time it evolved into this this shell with a that would allow his neck to stretch up and reach the vegetation.
There
so
you go.
They lived on different islands with different plants.
Thank you.
Mhm.
Okay, so Migucho, I met this guy in Santa Cruz, and he had made it his mission to pick up cigarette butts that he found in the gutters on the island, and he picked up 1 million cigarette butts, and he had made sculptures. So he had these sculptures. This is all cigarette butts. So that woman there is made from cigarette butts. The ball, the house behind it, those are all cigarette butts that he picked up and saved. Now, something also interesting about him is that he was actually a fisherman, and his boat got lost in the Pacific for over 2 months. His engine went out, and so he was at sea for over 2 months. So he wrote a book about that experience, and he's holding up his book in his hand. So he signed his little book for me, and there's actually a YouTube video that talks about him as the most interesting man in the world, and it talks about his life. But we don't have time to go into all that, but if you're interested, I'll give you the link. So anyhow. So what happened was that the second night we were supposed to stay, there ended up being a coup, not between the indigenous people and the government, but between the Golodrina crew and the boat owners. So they told us that they were going to have the motor fixed by 2, but they did not. Well, the generator fixed by 2, but they did not. And then at dinner that night, people got a little bit heated and said, it says in the contract that if a boat is not working, that you will provide another boat. Not that we're going to sit 2 nights in a hotel instead of on the water. So they said, well, you know, it's not going to be done until like midnight. And then we need to take it out for an hour to make sure that it works. And then we'll come back and pick you up. And it was like, well, if you're going to go out for an hour anyway, why don't we just get on the boat? You know, and then we're an hour away from shore and we can continue on. So it ended up at midnight. They woke us up and we all walked down to catch the water taxi. And here we are, no lights on the panga and sharks swimming all in the water. And we're headed to our boat so we could get on our boat. So
So that,
I
so
was
that we could, so that we could sail for 8 hours to our next island and not miss more of our tour.
exactly. So this was where we were catching the water taxi. So we did make it to San Cristobal the next day, Kicker Rock, Witch Hill. And on San Cristobal were goats. So goats are a problem in the Galapagos. They are not native. They are not wanted there. What happened was the Spaniards would come by and they would have goats on their boats and they would drop off the goats and they'd get the
What-
giant tortoises.
There
And
you
they'd
go.
put them in the bottom of the boats and store them upside down. And these tortoises would stay alive for a year. And they would eat them, they would use them for oil, they would just, they just tortured these tortoises. But then when they were done with the tortoises, they'd come back and for the goats, to eat the goats. But anyhow, so they ended up taking over the island so that they were eating all the native vegetation so that the giant tortoises were endangered because the vegetation that they eat was being depleted. So the government hatched this plan where called Operation Judas. And what they would do is they would take a goat, and it was a Judas goat, and it would wear a radio transmitter. The goats would be herd animals. They'd come down in helicopters. They'd shoot all the goats that they could see, except the goat with the radio collar. Well, they are creatures that like to be in herds. So that one goat left over with the radio collar would find where the rest of the herd was, and they'd be in the herd. And then the helicopter would come down and it would wipe out the goats, except the one Judas goat. And then he would go and find where the other goats were. And this is how this went. And they ended up killing 250,000 goats, I think it was. But there's still a problem with the goats on the island. So. And so here, look how small we are in our panga compared to the size of these islands. That's us down there. So, and then through here, you can see Kicker Rock through that's Kicker Rock.
Through the opening.
Through the opening. So that was a great place to go diving, by the way. So here's Kathy on our very well maintained trail. So, and there's some frigate birds flying around our boat. Here they are croaking.
So frigate birds on the nest talking to each other. So that balloon in their throat, if a male frigate bird, if something happens to his throat and the balloon will not inflate, he will not have a successful mating season. He's basically out of the game until that heals and he can then inflate his throat.
And this is what I'm talking about when I say the islands were pristine and it looked like no one else had been on it. And they really, yeah, it is. It's gorgeous. Jane, did you take this picture?
Yes.
I think you did. Yeah. Blue-footed boobies. Oh my gosh, love them. This is some that were in the trail that I was talking to, asking them to please move. They were like, nah, you can't. But anyhow, we went to Espanola, and this was the most amazing trifecta plus, because it was more than 3. So we had 4 species in one shot. You have a baby sea lion. The mama sea lion saw us and came up from the water, and she's got her baby there. There's a mockingbird next to the baby, and the mockingbird is eating the flies off of the baby's sill. In front is a marine iguana, and in back is a lava lizard. So you have 4 different species in that shot. It was absolutely amazing. That right in the back, right? Okay, and this is adorable. So this mockingbird gets a lot of thanks for cleaning off the flies off of this seal. Let's see.
This baby was just born. There were signs that it had just been born within the previous day or two.
Yeah. So that's an Espanola mockingbird.
And there's not a lot of water on these islands, so that's probably how they get their any kind of moisture as well.
There's a Galapagos hawk, which was endemic. It was on a lighthouse. So we were able to get some pictures of it. And Jane also got some pictures of it on a nest. So. And the marine iguanas, they actually eat algae. And so we saw one that was swimming and a sea lion was like knocking it underneath the water. They like to play with them, which the marine iguanas don't like. So I guess it's easier for them to stay on shore than to go into the water and be harassed by the sea lions. But so they wait till the tide goes down and then they chew the algae off of the rocks. And we have different species of marine iguana that are on the islands. And this red one on the right is a separate species. And this wasn't taken on the island. This was actually taken on Santa Cruz. And Salim, who was one of the people who were on our group, had been walking on the beach and she actually saw, and I'll see if I can fast forward it for you, but she saw one swimming.
We saw several swimming. We just didn't get as good a video as
Right. I have a video of one swimming and being harassed by a sea lion, but it's very, yeah. So isn't that gorgeous? She did a really good job. And there's a shark right there. So dun 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 dun. Okay. So we have the waved albatrosses, and of course they're endemic, and there's a little chick. They're just little cute little fluff balls. We're so happy to see them. And you can see this one right here has a mockingbird in the background, and the mockingbird is waiting for the albatross to get up off the egg, and then he's going to crack the egg with his beak and suck the yolk. So they have to be very vigilant to make sure that here's a.
Oh, I see them.
So anyhow, yeah, so they're. And this was the airport, the Albatross airport. And the albatross would walk up. It's a very steep cliff, as you can see. But Jane seems to think that we were actually sitting on the runway, so to speak.
The runway.
Yeah, so that they were coming up to us looking kind of confused, and some of them were walking back after they walked up to us, like, why is someone on my runway? But then some of them took off, but like this one in the back is going to take off. But the other one just kind of turned around and went back. They have an 8 feet wingspan, up to an 8 feet wingspan. And there's one that was flying. I think that was like Pixar to me, but that was by our boat. One was flying by our boat, and I got a picture of it. But and then this one, you can see how big their feet are. Yeah, that's a red-billed tropic bird. And then we had El Soplador, and Jane can tell you a story about that.
So this is a blowhole caused by the water coming through the lava rocks and creating this this fountain, if you will, of water that shoots up into the air. And what the guide was telling us that one of his fellow guides one day saw marine iguanas get pushed up into the air and saw flying marine iguanas at the blowhole.
Yes, yeah, the water pushed the iguanas up. So, okay. Now, this is the drama that I was telling you about that we didn't get to see played out. The first day that we were there, when we were on Bacchus Island, there was a great blue heron, and it was standing on a hill on top of a sea turtle nest. And the sea turtles, baby sea turtles, were emerging, and it was eating them. There was also magnificent fricate birds that were swooping down and eating the new hatchlings as well. So we are on this island, and we see that there is a baby sea turtle hatchling just hatched.
And
And it's
Catherine, back up for just a second. Most of them hatch at night, or they leave the nest at night, so that there are fewer predators. But when it's overcast and the light is dimmer, then sometimes they will move during the day, which is to their peril, as you're talking about.
yes. So this guy, there were some people, the other tour group was coming on, so we had to leave. And they had laid down some blue beach towels, and the sea turtle kind of changed course and started going towards the blue towels. So their guide picked up the blue towels and moved them, and the hatchling corrected his course and started going towards the ocean. But we could see a magnificent fricabird flying, and we're just like, what's going to happen? What's going to happen? But they're like, hey, sorry, you got to go. You got to get on the boat. So
Our time was up on the island and we had to
we
leave.
weren't able to see what happened.
So, and one of the things is, as Catherine mentioned early, these islands are managed as a national park.
Hang on, let me pause this, Jane.
Okay.
Go ahead. What were you saying?
One of the things is that you mentioned earlier, that these islands are managed as a national park, and the guides cannot interfere with the natural processes. So, nature's going to take its course, and we did not see the outcome of this, but even if it had been bad or looked bad, that our guide could not have done anything.
Yeah. So we ended up on Floriana. Floriana has an interesting history. There was a couple, a German doctor and one of his patients, and they were both married at the time, and they both decided they were going to go on Floriana and live. So
Married to other people.
Married to other people.
Right.
So they went to this island to inhabit it, and I guess it was read about in the newsletters back home in England. And so there was this other couple who wanted to go there. They had a young son, and she was pregnant. She goes, you know what? Let's go move on this island too, because there's a doctor there, and I can have my child and there'll be a doctor. So they showed up, and the doctor and his, whatever she was to him, is like, there's a cave up there. Let me take you to that cave. That's where you can live. So now there's two families living on the island. They were very, very upset that someone came to live on their island. Well, a baroness reads about this, and she decides this would be a great island to have a resort on. So she goes there with her two young lovers. Well, not young lovers. Anyhow, there were two men. So that she went there with, and she was going to build a resort, and she was going to develop it, which really pissed him off. But let's just say at the end of it, more people died than made it off the island. So, and some were never found again. So it's a mystery as to exactly what happened on Floriana. But if you ever want to read about that, let me know, and I'll tell you some documentaries you can watch about the incident. But anyhow, this was an early morning stingray hunt where they had us go up to the water so that we could watch the stingrays. And on this particular island on Santa Fe, there were these huge, gigantic cactus that were endemic to Santa Fe. Like they had 10-foot or more high trunks. They were a species of prickly pear, and the size of the cactus were like the size of a tennis racket. Like they were really big. And there was also other species of prickly pear on the island that the land iguanas would like to eat. So there's a land iguana chewing on some cactus. There's also painted locusts that were, as you can see, very aptly named. They're endemic to the island as well. And then on day 8, we went to Seymour, and we were greeted by this beautiful rainbow. But on the right, this is just kind of to give you an idea of the path. You see those 2 white sticks in the foreground? That was where we could only be between, was those 2. We couldn't venture off on that whole island, only on that path. So they're very, very protective of the environment there.
And a point is that for me, especially, you know, we were in Ecuador before we went in Galapagos before we went to Ecuador. And I was afraid I was going to trip and fall and hurt myself before I even ever got to Ecuador. I did not start using my walking sticks until about the 6th or 7th day. And I wish that I had used them earlier because the footing was very uneven. It was very precarious. And it was easy. It would have been easy to trip and fall and hurt yourself. So for anybody that's thinking about going, just keep that in mind, that if you are the least bit unsteady on your feet, you want to think about bringing some hiking sticks with you.
Okay. And here's some Nazca boobies playing with some bones, like maybe trying.
These are the chicks that are
Yes.
practicing.
Yeah. So they're practicing, I guess they're catching behavior. And then there's one behind it that sees it playing. So it decides it's going to come up and do it too. So it grabs the stick and it starts. So they were just playing with the bones. Now, the dark side of the Nazca boobies is that their sibling side. So the mama.
All of them, not just the Nazcas.
Okay, so all the boobies, they do sibling side where 2 eggs are laid and only one lives to adulthood, because the other one will outcompete the other chick for all the food. And so the other one ends up dying. So when we came across this one on the right-hand side, it was still breathing, just barely shallow breaths right next to these healthy ones. But there was nothing, and you want to save it. Well, can't we take it on the ship and save it? But you know, you can't. And it's really, really sad, but it's nature. Yeah, nature at its best. So like I said, we did a lot of diving while we were there, snorkeling in the afternoons typically. So I went ahead and put little 30-second clips of some of the underwater things that we saw. This is a diamond stingray. And this is Roberto, no diving gear, nothing but holding his breath. And by the way, I edited this clip down to only 30 seconds. So he was very adept at being underwater. And then this is one of my favorites, is that we had a spotted eagle ray. And these were huge. They can have like up to a 8-foot wingspan. And I was able to swim alongside one and just kind of stroke while it was going. That was such a magical experience, to like being next to it and just gliding alongside it. It was really quite beautiful. But Roberto got this video too, and he actually was able to get the underside of the spotted eagle ray. 8, like 8.
I mean, lengthwise.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. So they were big. And then there are so many these videos of these guys nuzzling up to the camera and things like that. But they were very playful. I had my phone hanging from my neck and my underwater camera, because he had my GoPro, and they like grabbed them, like they were grabbing them, trying to get them. Yes. Yeah, they were playing with the plastic bag, and Colette got it out. So.
And they, Martine and Jason would do flips and twirls and things, and the sea lions would imitate them. So.
Yeah, it was pretty cool. And then we had green sea turtles and loggerhead sea turtles as well. We had 2 different species there. And they're just chilling under the water. And this was one of the coolest finds, I think, that was not expected that we saw, was a tiger snake eel. And it does look like a snake, but it's actually an eel. So Yeah. Isn't that cool? Yeah, yeah. So that was pretty exciting. But our itinerary that we had, what was included in our boat was that we had our accommodations on board, all of the meals. We always had snacks after we got back from a hike, or if we got back from snorkeling, we always had snacks, fresh water, drink, coffee, tea. They had nice coffee and tea there. The bus service between the airport, etc. That was all included. But what wasn't included was like the air flight to the Galapagos. There's a transit card for $20 that you have to get. The park fee is $100 per person. You don't have to bring your own snorkeling gear. You can actually rent it by the day. I brought my own. Next time, if I ever get the chance to go, I will rent it all except the snorkel, because it was just too much of a hassle I actually left my dive weights behind in Galapagos because I was so tired of carrying those bags. But tips, you'll need to give tips to the crew, the guide, etc. And there is a chart for that. So now that you're thinking about a trip to the Galapagos, there is some travel advice that we can give you. Is you want to check with the United States Department for any travel advisories like coups in the government or things like that. You want to see a travel doctor before you go to Ecuador, because, or any country, but we're specifically talking about this because it is an elevation change for us. Even though it's at sea level, when you get into Quito, you're 5,000 feet up at the airport. And so right away, you're going from almost sea level down here, right? Less than 100 feet to over 5,000. So you do actually get off that plane and kind of feel that, you are at a different altitude. So you can get some altitude medicine for that. My particular doctor gave me a motion sickness patch to put behind my ear. And I have to say, those are very, very rough seas. And I've gotten motion sickness before from 12-foot swells off the coast of California. And I did not get sick this whole time. And it was
amazingly, nobody on our boat got sick. Nobody.
Yeah, nobody. Yeah. And so and my travel doctor did say that a lot of her patients recommend the little acupuncture puncture bracelets you can get at Walgreens. It's like an elastic band, and it has like a bead in it, and you put it on a specific point on your wrist, and it will keep you from getting motion sickness as well. But I had the patch, and it was great. You had to change it out every 3 days. I didn't have any problems. So definitely go to a travel doctor, and they will tell them where you're going. They'll pull up a map, and they'll let you know what you need. They'll give you some antibiotics in case you get the runs. They'll give you, medicine for that as well. So, and also you want to do cash for tips. They use American dollars in Ecuador. So I was so excited. I got back and I had collected all my Ecuadorian coins because I wanted to give them to my grandkids. And when I got back and I opened up my bag and pulled out these coins, they were American dollars. The little gold, like Saskatchewan or whatever, Sacagawea, the Sacagawea dollars. So anyhow, they were the Sacagawea dollars. And I thought I was saving all this Ecuadorian money and like was stockpiling it. Now I have all these Sacagawea dollars. I don't know where I'm going to spend them at, but anyhow. But the Galapagos boat crew, there was 12 of us. The tip range was between 140 to 280. And then the Galapagos guide, his tip was between $80 and $160.
And
So
I think the cruise, Catherine, I
per
don't know.
person on the boat.
And Catherine, I don't know if you have it in there, but the actual cruise itself for that 8 days. So the first one we booked, I think, was 32 or 3,300, and then minus 800. So this one would have been about $2,500 for 8 days, which is really not bad. So all of you should go to the Galapagos.
So, and definitely bring an underwater camera, if you can, and you can take your iPhone under the water, but you have to set it up a certain way because in the case, it it has trouble taking photos, so because of the pressure, I guess, so, but there are things you can follow online and you can learn how to use it. So are there any questions that we have? We have a few minutes? Nope. Okay.
I don't see anything in the chat either. No questions in the chat.
Okay, I mean, no questions in the chat either? Okay, awesome. Well, thank you very much. I hope you enjoyed it. Okay. Bye.